Welcome to another episode of Stoke Meter. We have the pleasure of having Tammy Rabideau on the show with us today. And Tammy, I couldn't be more excited to have you as a guest because of the amazing stories that you have shared all over the place. And just so the audience knows, Tammy is a New York Times modern love essayist. If no one has ever read any of the things that she has written, you've got to. She's been through some incredible experience. She's also a writer for the New York, aside from the New York Times, the Washington Post. She's been in Newsweek, HuffPost, Reader's Digest, and a ton of other things. And also talks a lot of the things that have to do family, homelessness, emotional health, and so on and so forth. So there's all kinds of things that we could go into here, but without further ado, Tammy, again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Fantastic. Well, we'll just jump right in if that's okay.
Yep.
I came across an article that it was well, first of all, the very first one I ever read, and again, just so the audience knows, I was reading a couple of articles and I didn't realize they were interconnected. And the first one was the one that I read was how you became a rock star groupie, if that's how we go about, and the different things that you learned along the way, and there were a lot of pros, no doubt about that. But then there was a lot of the different things that you might not have experienced. And this was, again, when you were 15 years old, right?
Yeah, I think my first encounter, I was actually 14, which I didn't realize until, research after I had written the article, but it was around that time frame, 14 to 15.
Wow, even younger. Well, so if you wouldn't mind, with those that might not have read those articles, how did it all start? I mean, I remember when I was 14 years old, and I remember it was Rick Springfield, and that's why I learned how to play the guitar, right?
Yep.
I would have been a Springfield groupie. And so if you wouldn't mind, just how did it go about? How did you get involved with getting in with all those groups and so on and so forth?
It started with gosh, the band, which I'm not sure if I should name the bands because of
Yeah, for
legal,
sure.
legal issues.
Yes.
But my favorite band in the whole world. And I had been wanting to see them for a long time. I was a huge, I loved the bands Loverboy, Cheap Trick,
Yeah.
um, you know, Tesla. There were just all these bands that I really loved.
Yeah.
And it was just that era where, rock music was really big, and MTV, it had come about, and so you could see them live. And I came from a musical family also. So, we always had like um, drum sets and amps and guitars set up in the basement. And my brothers and my dad, they played music. I would sing when they'd let me. So I just really, became, it was kind of an outlet for me too, where, I went to like Catholic schooling and I had a very conservative upbringing. And but there was this outlet with this rock music.
Mhm.
So that's what led me to my very first concert, which was at the Green Bay Arena in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is where I was from.
Oh,
I was
nice.
living, yeah, it was where I was living. And a friend and I, we were in line at the show and saw the tour bus come around. And so just, and I had been writing to the fan club since I was probably 11 years old, literally. Um, Getting messages back, believing that they were really from the lead singer who I was, just in love with. And and then I remember when I was about, I think I was 12, and I really wanted to go to a concert. It was in Seymour, Wisconsin. So I was thinking, I'm going to figure out a way to go. But my parents, of course, wouldn't let me go. But my mom had a friend who was going to this concert. So she's like, you can't go to the concert, but um, if you pray, it's in my evening prayers. If you pray really hard, like maybe something will appear in the morning. And so I remember waking up and like hanging from my pink canopy bed was this t-shirt, from the band, from the concert. So it kind of just went from there. I'm just a huge, I really idolized them. I just loved music, I kind of like both wanted to meet the bands and be the bands, like I
Right.
wanted to just be in that whole world. So
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
started.
Well, and how did you get into meeting with them? Because I've tried to meet with bands, right? And the closest I ever got is, a matter of fact, it was at a concert I was over with Gary. It was Bush, and I got stage pass to Gavin. That was about the closest I've ever been. But you actually got right in with them. How
Yeah.
did that occur?
Well, back when we walked around the very first time, and I think I was 14 then. We went around by the buses, and well, actually, we had been waiting in line for so long because we didn't want to lose our spot. So I was like, we have to get there super early. So we waited in line. Um, but when we saw the bus come, we're like, geez, maybe the band is on that bus. Like, if we want to meet the band, maybe we should go back, follow that bus. So we took our chances, got out of line, and went around to the back. And, standing around there just kind of awkwardly. And you know, the windows were kind of darkened and such, but eventually the doors open and the lead singer and some other people just walked right out. And so it was like it was like a miracle, for a 14-year-old kid who's like been dreaming of this forever. And the lead singer and the guitar player and a groupie, they kind of just like walked right up to us and asked us, were we there to see the show? And I mean, I couldn't even, get the words out fast enough. And then they asked us if we wanted backstage passes, which we said that we were like,
Wow.
do we? Yes, we do. So that's how it started. And then it was like a technique that I learned. Basically, we were like, why don't wait in line? We want to get backstage. So if we'd go to a show at the arena, we'd go around back. And every time we would just about get backstage passes.
Oh my
So
goodness.
yeah,
I wish I
I
would have
mean,
known that secret a little earlier.
but also, there's predatory behavior going on. So you're not young
Mm.
and female. So this is part of
That's what,
the
yeah,
problem.
exactly.
This is part of the problem.
I was just
Mm.
gonna say that it's so I love music, and I'm like you. I was always, you know, about basically any concert I would go to, and to age myself a little bit. This was back in the era of, and I liked a lot of different genres. Jane's Addiction was one of my favorite bands, still is. But at the same time, like New Order and Sisters of Mercy, all these bands. And as I hear you talk, and it kind of pains me a little bit because I know the
Yeah.
direction that this is going to turn.
Mhm.
But I look back, and it was a raw time in music back then,
Mhm.
Yes.
but it was also kind of a really dark time in the culture of how women were viewed. It was really, and it kind of peaked in the. I mean, I don't know how old you are, or your era, but it kind of reached this pitch or a peak in the 90s that was downright scary.
It
But anyway,
was.
I didn't mean to say
Yeah.
interrupt you, but this,
I
it just
can-
really hits a chord with me because I just saw so much going on back then that was really, I'm just going to use the word scary. It really was.
Yeah, being back there too and being backstage at that age, and being at parties in hotels and such, it is, as an adult, as a older person looking back, you have a different perspective, but you really don't even know how to take in.
Mhm.
And I was so entranced, so to me, it was like, you've died and gone to heaven. Like there's nothing, this is like the best thing that could ever happen in your life. And so whatever it is that's happening back there, you just you don't even really know to like, I mean, I knew somewhere inside that, it's not good, the drugs, all kinds of crazy things going on. Um, but you still just, you don't really know. And part of you, at that age doesn't care because you just want to be a part of this and you feel like this is the cost. This is, you just have to
Mhm.
deal with that if you want to be close to these people.
It's
So
kind of like I always use the word surreal. When you
Yeah.
get into a moment where something is surreal, your common, what you would normally think is okay kind of goes out the window, especially when you have something like a crazy power dynamic like that, where these are your idols. These
Yeah.
are people you look up to.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. I look at points in my life where I've been in situations that I would consider surreal.
Mhm.
All logic goes out the window.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
But I have to ask this too, because I had an experience in New York City. I was invited to this is right after I moved there from Arizona, and somehow I met this individual that got me into this ridiculously high-end party. And I went in my jeans and this crappy t-shirt, and everyone is wearing this crazy stuff. And so there were multiple levels in this club. And so it was where the normal people were, and then you had the kind of more the mid-tier actors and actresses and so forth. And then it was the bottom floor, which is kind of like the who's who. And I'll never forget it, because when I saw faces that I knew, and then my friend pointed out who these other individuals were that had so much influence everywhere. But I've never seen a preponderance of of the drugs and all those different things, and it hit me right then. And this was older. I wasn't a groupie or anything at this point. I had this thought of, man, these are just people. And all of a sudden, where the pedestals that I held them on, I still had that deep respect, but there was something different. I can't explain it, but I'm wondering if that happened to you when you were going through all these different things, where it was on such a high pedestal, but now, oh, man, these guys and gals bleed red just like me.
Yeah. I think I think that happened actually pretty early on for me. I mean, there were a period of years though, from 14 to 17, where I still just I kept going. And I remember one time actually, again, not being allowed to go to a concert and walking, my friend and I, sneaking out, had all these plans, carrying our high heels in our hands while we're walking on this road to get to this place where this concert is going to be. And the band, you know, driving, I mean, this is literally what happened. The same band that I had seen perform backstage just comes driving down the road on their way to their hotel, and just happens to drive by us on the road and stops and picks us up. And so I just thought, it was all this miraculous, like this was meant to be,
Mhm.
and as a young kid, I had these fantasies about, the lead singer had been, recently divorced. He was in his mid 30s. And so I thought, you know, uh, maybe him and I are gonna, get married. Like you have these
Yeah,
ideas as a kid, which are crazy and ridiculous, but you have these ideas.
yeah.
So I kept with that for a while, and I felt like I don't know, something was gonna come of all of it.
Mhm.
But by the time I started to see things differently, after probably the third time being backstage, and then when I was 17, I stopped. I had lost all interest in even music. I didn't
Mm.
want to really listen to the bands. I didn't want to go to any concerts at all.
Right.
And in fact, I just stopped going to concerts completely, pretty much from there on out.
Mm.
What do you think? What happened at that point? What shifted?
I think that it's a good question. The same things had been happening as been happening before, but it was my seeing it and seeing what the pattern was and the things that went on, and what other younger girls who I saw back there also um, were being exposed to, and who were probably 14 or 13 even.
Oh.
Um, there was an episode at a hotel where there were some drugs, and I never did any of the drugs backstage. Not like, just wasn't. I mean, it wasn't that I probably would have, because I probably would have done anything. But I remember the opportunity came for doing drugs, and actually it was the lead singer who, this guy was like lining up some cocaine, and he said, "No, no, no, you don't want to do that." Like he kind of took me away from that, and so I
Mm.
never, I never ended up doing it. But there were other people and other girls that did, um, and um, there was a band member I knew that was just particularly predatory, and he would take girls into the bathroom. And so I saw this happening with a young girl at the Ramada Inn at this hotel, and knowing that I had been also, you know, in that bathroom with this person before, and so I just really became very sickened by it. It
Mm.
really, um, seeing a couple different women or girls in a bed with one rock star, and it just really, I couldn't reconcile it within myself anymore, and so it
Mm.
just, I didn't feel like, I felt sick about it. I just started to feel internally ill.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to be, I just didn't want to be a part of it anymore. It just didn't, I
Mm.
couldn't, it just didn't fit with where I was going and the trajectory I saw myself in, and what I originally thought it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I just couldn't,
Mm.
yeah,
I have
do
a
it.
question. I have a question for you,
Yeah.
Tammy, and I'm just wondering. I have a a friend that went through something similar, kind of a similar experience to you over kind of a prolonged period of time, probably about 2 years, kind of went through that kind of a lifestyle. And we talked about it before, and I'm just curious if you had a similar experience where with her, the reason it kind of drug out and that she was in that environment for so long was she even got to a point where she was disgusted, hated it, didn't want anything to do with it. But on the flip side, she still had people that weren't in there that looked up to her, that were like, you
Oh,
live, what
yeah.
an exciting life, and you have all this access and you have all the, what I mean? Whereas, and so it was like this duality of, yeah, I'm here, I hate it, but at the same
Yeah.
time, you know, I don't know. Did you experience anything like that?
I think later, a little bit later on towards the end, I did, but I had friends, in high school. It was it was kind of like, I definitely had friends in high school who thought it was just like, they'd see pictures of me and the bands, which at that time, I saved them. I still have them, and um, would, and all these backstage passes, thought it was like unbelievable, and so wanted, me to take them, with me to go backstage. So there was that, but I didn't so much care that they thought it was such a great thing. It
Yeah.
was really more my own personal thing, and my, deep love for this one band, and my obsession with their music, having every album. And so that was what kind of drove it. And then my friend who I go with, she loved other bands. So she would want to say, let's go to this band, let's go to that band. So that's how we kind of ended up going to these other bands. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I have so many kids that I work with right now, just through sports, and then of course my own kids. And they have all these people, like all of us, that we look up to, and uh, it's fabulous. And to your point, you develop these fantasies like, man, I'd love to be with that individual, and so on and so forth. So that's the appearance, right? What would you say are some of the realities that you would want to share with people that are in that stage? Because the, as I listen to you, you become incredibly vulnerable because of that putting up a high side, that appearance side of it versus the reality side of it. So I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it does. It's very difficult, I think, because at that age, teenagers are in a different place, that
Mhm.
you might not necessarily be able to reach them no matter what you're saying. And so I do feel that, I mean, there are, of course, parenting measures that would be very important to take in order to have open communication, in order, so that the child would know that they could go to you, because there were times that I did want to go to my mom and dad, but I had done all of these things behind their back. And they knew nothing. I mean, except for my dad had found a couple Polaroids that were taken in a hotel and was, I think he even called the police, tried to involve the authorities. But otherwise, I knew that, I would be to blame, also that I would have been wrong, and also that I would have, you know, I- it was a very, very strict and somewhat volatile household that I grew up in. So therefore, that played a
Mm.
part in me not being able to communicate. And if I had, maybe things would have been different. I'm not sure. But I think I just strongly do feel that a lot of things start at home and with parenting kids from the beginning. And that doesn't mean you're always going to be able to reach them, but it's very key. It's something that I took going forward with my own daughter, and when I raised her, to try to have as much open communication as possible, because she didn't have that. She wasn't as much of a wild child as me in that regard. She was much more studious and academic, and not into. I mean, later on, I think we went and saw, I don't know, a Taylor Swift, but it was like, wasn't I think that was it. It was like the one band we saw. So there's that, and then also just that these people are just real people,
Yes.
um, and it's hard to. Um, I mean, somewhere in the back of my mind, I did know that these things were wrong, and I do credit that to my upbringing.
Mm.
And I really do believe that was why I had something to fall back on that said, this isn't the direction that you want to go, and um, also the effects of these things happening, no matter how pristine of a life you've been living or how great of parents you have, it has a serious negative side that can lead to very damaging effects, on your
Mm.
self-esteem, on your mental health. And if you don't feel like you can share them, I mean, you don't know that at the time, but that's one thing I would caution, because that stuff can come up throughout life.
Yeah. Oh man. And that you had mentioned that in one of the pieces, and it was incredibly vulnerable, man. I mean, I could really feel it when you went through all those different experiences with the bands, and it was some type of dysmorphia. I can't even remember what it was, but it was that you became hyper aware of appearance, and so on and so forth. But how that's something I know my kids go through it. Maybe not to that extent for sure, but certainly almost every kid goes through some kind of man, I don't look good enough. I don't any of these. After going through all those things, how would you? Well, it sounds like you already have passed it down to your daughter. It sounds like she's she's like pretty like I know who I am type of thing. But how would you give that grounding to, or what were some suggestions? Even I'm just curious as a parent myself. How would you help kids, especially kids and even adults, be happy with who they are?
Oh dear, it's so difficult. Because there are a couple different elements. There's like the element of a mental illness that might be just sort of lying in wait, that maybe we all could potentially or are predisposed to having something happen.
Right.
Um, and depending on what the groundwork is there, you may go in this direction or you may not. You may have these, sort of like someone that has the potential to have diabetes or cancer, but your lifestyle could, just using it as an example. So um, I feel like, um, I mean, with your children, for me, it was trying to, I obviously have the best relationship that I could with my daughter. I was hyper focused on, aware of where I had come from, uh,
Mhm.
in my upbringing, in all of the things that happened to me, and diligently wanting to not go down that path, in
Yes.
raising her. So, and the thing is, it just won't happen naturally. And so I was in therapy on and off my whole life. I'm not afraid of
Mhm.
say that I'm not afraid to go to therapy when
Right.
things go right, because I needed help to learn how to parent my kid better. Just all of those things help her, to not have the same self-esteem problems that I had. Um, but there, you can't save your kids from everything. I mean, no matter what, no matter how good a job you do. So, um, but one of the key things with myself, and I feel like with everybody, is that whether it's your appearance, but and whether your obsession with your appearance turns into a full-fledged body dysmorphic disorder or mental illness where it is, debilitating your entire life, um, it's learning to be okay with yourself. This is like a big grand statement, but it really is important. Learning to be okay with yourself and all of your circumstances, no matter what is happening, no matter what you look like. Because if you're always trying to, and I remember my daughter and I talk about this a lot, um, be okay based on what you look like or what the outside world is saying about you, or whether you're being successful in this career or whatever it is. If those are the things that are dictating whether you're okay in the world, including your appearance, you're going to be on a roller coaster and it's going to be hell. It's and so there are steps underneath that a person has to take in order to try to stay on that trajectory. But it's very important because um if you're always looking to the outside world to tell you you're good enough and you look good enough, you're gonna it's gonna be horrifying.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's changed a little bit too, with social media. Is it used to be that you would just worry about your friends in high school or your circle was pretty small. But I tell, so you have to be careful that you don't tie your self-image to your friends, and now people all over the world can tell you. I have that conversation with my daughters, and I say many times, it's like, would you sit down in a lawn chair and just let random people throw stuff at you? And you have no control. Some of it may be good, some of it may be bad. But many times when we're sitting there and we scroll on social media, is you're letting these messages just come at you. And so many of them, I think, especially for females, can be extremely dangerous. They can be harmful.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that social media and media in general has a huge, significant impact on derailing the self-esteem and self-image of, men and women. And I think they're more privy to it, but absolutely it does. And I think that can, I mean, for myself, I have to be careful about that, even at my age, even having been through therapy. It doesn't matter. I can be derailed at any time. And it's being careful about allowing those messages in and what you see. And because like you said, it's just being thrown at you constantly, and you're just taking it all in, and it has an effect. It absolutely has an effect.
I mean, 100% agree. I remember when we first started this and we started getting feedback. If you would have told me I was going to be derailed by a comment, I'd go, nah, not going to happen. I remember when I first got a couple comments, I go, I will find you. And it was so silly. I'm talking to a person, an anonymous person, which should also be a sign. It's so funny.
Have you ever seen any of the comments on my writing? It is crazy. Sometimes they'll reach like some of my essays have gone viral, so they're like 2 million viewers in 5 days, and I try not to look, and it doesn't matter. Like, you may have 56,000 comments, and maybe 50,000 of them were really good and encouraging, but there will be still 6,000 of them that are the most horrific things you have ever read in your life. And then when they can't reach me there, they go to my website and sends me horrible. And so at first, it really is like, you are like, you want to get on there and type, And so my daughter always like, don't get into the comments, Mom. Just don't do it.
Your daughter is wise.
Well, it's interesting. They've I don't know. I think there's a documentary, or I can't remember where I saw it, but they were talking about the danger of the like button. Just that alone is, has become such a toxic thing. And I've seen within the last year or so, YouTube took the dislike button off. They actually took it away because it was becoming so damaging. It still, affects things, but you just don't see it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see,
It
again, the
really is.
power that we put into complete strangers.
It's
Yes.
insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah,
Well,
it can really set you off.
oh, yeah, yeah. I've got a pivot though too. Um, we've talked about all those dangers and such, but there's another story I read about you, and that was the time when you were homeless and the kindness of others that led to me being able to read about your story eventually. And I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind going into that experience, because that just captured a snapshot. I'm sure there was a lot more into that. But if you wouldn't mind talking about the kindness of others.
Of course. Um, part part of the reason when I do write is because I want to, because I've been through experiences, and it's not that you just been through them, it's that they turn, there was an outcome there. There was something, there was a good takeaway, there was something you learned or something that happened. Because everybody has bad things that happen to them, of course. Um, and this the story that for Insider that I think you're talking about, I
Yes.
wrote about homelessness a different time as well, but this recent one um, was a time that I was displaced. My daughter's father was incarcerated. He was serving a 10-year sentence, and we were just struggling to make ends meet, which happened many times over the 2 decades that I was raising her. Um, but I didn't want the story to so much focus just on the homelessness, and it was a much longer story, of course. But publications have their criteria, so I think it was like 2,400 words. I had to cut down to 850, so I
Yeah.
had to take out a lot of stuff. Um, but we uh, had gone to Denver. We had actually gone from, let's say, our place that I could no longer afford, and then we went to stay with my mom's. Couldn't stay there. Her landlord wouldn't let us stay, like for no good reason. He was just like a super strict landlord. My mom was a great tenant, had an extra room. And we ended up, I call this person a friend, and in the essay it was actually like a distant relative, a cousin.
Mm.
And he had left Madison and gone to Denver and was always trying to convince us to go. And so I had a conversation with him at that time. And so he said, now is the time, you should come out. And I have plenty of room. And my mom didn't think it was a great idea, but I didn't have many options. So a lot of people have input during when these things are happening, but you're in a crisis. You
Yeah.
have no place to go. And I was like hustling out there. I had very little money, trying to find a place for us. And I mean, I can feel the anxiety even thinking of it now, honestly.
Yeah.
And so, um, I just, and actually, even after that, my mom was like, no, go to your grandmother's house. So, I mean, so we left, we're in like 6 places. So now we're at my grandmother's house, and now I can't even I have to leave the job I'm at.
Mhm.
And so it's just this horrible, and I felt so awful. Like I'm, a 30 some year old woman. I'm living at my grandmother's house with my kid because I can't support her. Her father's in prison, and I just, it's a horrible, horrible position to be in. And of course, I blame myself for all of it. So I packed the car up, and I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my grandmother. I just like packed the car up and put everything else had already been in storage, and we drove to Denver. And we were there a period of time. I got a job at this company called Cooper Machinery, or I think it was called, and working as an administrative assistant. And there was a guy there who right away was like super friendly to me. And his name was Dick Eaton, Richard Eaton. And I was like at the front desk, kind of like receptionist slash admin in this small company. And it was all guys. And he would just always come up and check in with me in the morning. He knew my situation, was just looking out, and he would ask me to dinner with him and his wife. I had that in the original story, but I couldn't. So
Mhm.
they'd pick us up, take us out to eat, and showed us some places around Denver, and just like really good hearted, made me feel comfortable. Just
Mhm.
a really great guy. I think maybe Dick was maybe he was 50 then. I think he had a child who was grown.
Mhm.
um, just a super good-hearted person. Always asked me if I was okay, how things were going there. I later came to find out, like, our boss, Frankie, Frank Chavez, he had been hired by Dick Eaton, like, years ago, like, in
Oh,
1979, like, this is what they told me. So, um, that was my experience there. They were just good group of people, and I was doing my job, and then there was the morning, so there was the argument I had with my cousin the night before, and it was a very small argument, but it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. It was like, things have been bubbling underneath the surface, and now these spots, it was actually like my daughter had carried her plate to the kitchen, and some spots had gotten on the floor, and,
mm,
one of them cleaned up. And so there was just like this whole, it was an argument. I'm sure I said things that were not nice. It wasn't like, just all one-sided. And I got to work the next morning. I left, I dropped my daughter off at school. I went to work, and there was an email in my inbox, and it was just telling me that I like, there was no ifs, ands, or buts. He's like, I'm putting your stuff outside the apartment right now, and you're not welcome here anymore. And that's
wow.
it. And so, and I knew him, like, um I knew his behaviors and his parents, so I like knew like there was not much of a chance that I was gonna be able to turn this around.
Yeah.
But I did, of course, had to try. So I just remember that I was sitting at my desk and literally in a just spaced out, place, and within minutes, and trying to figure out what I was going to do. Like, I knew I had to leave. I was like, I have to leave my job right now. I have to quit. I have to go get my kid. I got to get my stuff. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. My car was not great car. It wasn't working well. The brakes were shot. And Dick came up to that front desk, and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" His usual thing. And I just said to him, um, I have to leave. I'm being kicked out of my apartment right now. I have nowhere to go. I started rambling on, my car isn't going to make it. And he was just like, okay, just hold on a second, you know, and do not leave, and I'll be right back. And so, and that's just literally what happened. And these people just put, I mean, I've thought about it and told this story over the years because it was like a miracle to me. After you see, like, you run into so many things where people are rude or callous or unwilling to help or not give you any break on anything. And these people just, were incredible. So um, Dick came back to my desk, and he had two guys with him. One of the guys' names I didn't get right in the story. I tried to do research, but I couldn't get it. So it was Rusty and a guy named Stan Newman. And um, I just remember them standing there and him saying, this is it. This is what we're going to do. You're going to go with Ray. We're going to get your stuff right now. He's got a truck. We're taking it back to Cooper. Where are your car keys? Give him to Rusty. He's going to look at your brakes. I mean, it was like a miracle. I mean, it was like a miracle. And so I was, beside myself. I couldn't, I was shocked. So of course I was like, yeah. So we got all my stuff. We brought it back to Cooper. We're back there unloading it. And it was just these pieces that they put in place. And I know my story goes through all of it, but most of it, Rusty came back. He handed me he's like, yeah, like nothing, like it was nothing. Just, yep, they're all fixed. A few hours later, I'm back at my desk. We've unloaded everything in the warehouse. And he said, I checked your fluids, your tires, you're all good. If you're heading back to Wisconsin, if that's where you're going. And I mean, I couldn't have come up with $300 to fix my brakes,
Yeah.
save my soul. And so this guy was like, I jumped out of my desk. I mean, I jumped out of my desk and hugged him. I mean, I just was like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I knew, I mean, it was these things that they did. Yeah. So Dick initiating it, these guys taking me, getting my stuff, helping me, and then saying, okay, tonight we're coming to meet back at the warehouse. We're shipping this all back to Wisconsin. So, I mean, how would have I got my stuff? I'd accumulated these things in 7 months, free of cost. By the time I arrived in Wisconsin, the stuff was there and kept coming.
Unreal. It's amazing how that lifts the spirit so much and gives you not only hope, but an impetus to do something better. And that's exactly what you did, man. You wasted no time in making it better. And I believe that's what led to you going to school for journalism or something like that, right? Or
Um,
am I off on that?
I think you were slightly off on that. But it did lead me to, I mean, what it really did, besides the fact that they helped me, gave me money, gave me hotel vouchers for our ride back,
Oh wow,
all these things, cash. They gave me $600 cash. They'd taken up a collection.
wow.
They literally locked it down for me, so I had nothing to worry about. Um, and one thing I didn't put in the story is that Frank, the branch manager, he actually, when he called me to his office, said, "I would like you and your daughter. You can move in with us. I have a big house. You can stay here." Um, but he said, "But if you don't want to," he said, "I can help you out with that too." And then he gave me the cash.
Wow.
But it really, I never forgot that. I never, I never forgot that. I remember that. I've told the story because besides helping me there, I was down, and it did reinstill my my belief that there are good people, that there is hope, and that I could make it.
Yeah,
And that was a key thing because it was hard, it was a hard time.
yeah.
So, but I didn't go to school for journalism, actually, sociology and um, professional counseling. That's what I studied.
Oh, nice. That's perfect. You're still helping others. I love it. Well, not only through your writing, but it just sounds like just all around. I'm sure there's so many people that have been infected, not infected, impacted by Tammy. There's no doubt.
It's important to give back. It's important to give, period, even if you're not giving back in whatever. I mean, I strongly feel that. So
Yeah.
So
Oh,
this is a, I don't even know if you can answer this question, but so the name of the company was Cooper, you said Cooper something, Cooper
for
Machinery or whatever.
machine, machine.
What, how did that company create a place where you ended up with such amazing people
mhm,
that were, I mean, again, you may not even know, but I just think it's intriguing because most places aren't like that anymore.
mm-mm.
Yeah.
No.
And they don't have that familial take care of each other feel. But do you know what it was about Cooper that that brought such amazing people in one spot?
I wish I did because I, like many people, have worked in a lot of places that have not been ideal.
Mhm.
Um, less than neutral, like really bad.
Sure.
And I don't know what it was. I think they were just kind of like family oriented, and it was very much like more casual,
Mhm.
and not there. There definitely wasn't like any kind of um, micromanaging. It was more like you were trusted to, um, you know, handle your own job. I'm just trying to think of what else it was. It was very casual. It wasn't, like a PC, a politically correct kind of
Yeah.
place like nowadays, where there's a
Yeah.
lot of rules. It definitely wasn't like that, but it didn't matter to me because they were just really good-hearted people that, and I don't know what it was. I've since a lot of times I've done after being in different businesses, I've done different research on the kinds of things that make a place a great place. And I don't know what it was for them, to be honest. They were just good
Interesting.
people.
They sounded incredible, and that's what made me happy for you, and tying in the different stories of how you were going through all the things that you learned as a youth to now as a mother, and then finding those amazing people, and now you impacting so many. It's just fabulous. It comes full circle in a way of positiveness that, I mean, as dorky as that might have just sounded, when I read your stories, I really do feel a degree of not only hope, but just the resilience of the human spirit, especially yours. And I can't thank you enough for being vulnerable and I've used that word a couple of times in this discussion here, because it is what you put out there is incredibly vulnerable, and that's why it resonates with me as well as the people I share it with. So I can't thank you enough for being that kind of writer.
Oh, thank you
Yeah,
very much.
yeah.
Um,
Oh
it's
man,
my
yes,
I
but
love writing is my thing now, so I try to do it the best I can. I think that vulnerability is a important quality in people, and sometimes we're afraid to be vulnerable, or sometimes it's a superficial kind of vulnerability I
yes.
see sometimes.
Oh
And
yeah, I've seen that too.
helpful.
Well, what I think is interesting is you were talking about parenting styles, vulnerability, I think, is also more acceptable in a very positive way when it comes to parenting now.
Yeah. Yes.
Like you were talking about earlier, there were times you wish you were able to talk to your parents and tell them what things that were happening in your life. But, you know, parenting back then, parents weren't vulnerable in the sense of being able to be open and to listen. So there's also that reverse non-vulnerability, I guess.
Reverse non-vulnerability.
But yeah, so anyway, I thank you for your vulnerability, but also, thank you for what you're putting out. Thank you for your writings. The stuff that I've looked at has just been incredibly inspiring.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.